Started. Good afternoon and welcome to this Enactus UK University Advisor webinar. I'm delighted to welcome Leslie Taylor from Birmingham City University, who I'll ask to introduce herself in a moment. I'm Bonnie Hacking. I'm University Advisor at the University of St Andrews, and I also have the pleasure of chairing the University Advisor Steering Group. And for those of you who maybe haven't participated in one of these webinars before, we try to do these about once a month. It doesn't always work out quite like that. And we kind of flop about. So one month it will be University Advisor led, as this one is. And then some months the Enactus UK team actually leads the webinar. And so there's a number of things that we'll talk about later on, but I'm delighted to welcome you all here. If you're new to Zoom, I will try to make sure that you stay muted and with your camera off for the purposes of the webinar to start with. In just a moment, Leslie will introduce herself and tell you a little bit about the situation at Birmingham City and talk about some of the challenges she's had and some of the support and guidance she's hoping to get from the community here today. At that point, if you have a comment you would like to make, a question to ask, or some feedback that you would like to give, you are welcome either to use the chat function, and I will keep an eye on that, or you are welcome to unmute yourself and speak to us. So I'd like to hand over to Leslie. And Leslie, thank you so much for joining us today and for being the focus of our case study. Over to Leslie.
Thank you, Bonnie, and thanks everyone for tuning in. I guess this is a plea for help. We are very new to Enactus. This is our third year, and it is true to say that when we had Enactus in the first year, we probably had the best project, which is ironic really that we sort of now are in our third year and we're struggling even more. And I guess the reasons why we wanted Enactus on the campus was to actually, as everybody else, to support the community and also to provide a variety of different opportunities for students in an appropriate manner. I think some of the issues we've encountered here is that we don't seem to be able to sustain the right type of people that are interested in Enactus for the right reasons. Now, I have to take some responsibility for that in terms of maybe how we've promoted it, and we have to step back from that and consider how we're promoting it, how we're supporting it. So some of the questions, I think, are very, very basic, you know, about can we actually have projects that are embedded to certain work within modules, and could that be the glimmer of a new Enactus project? How do you consider using different types of students at the different levels? Do you recruit? We obviously work with our SU, and we did democratic votes, so sometimes that wasn't the right person in the right role. How do we get this so that the student understands the commitment and the responsibility of being part of Enactus, and we also, as an institution, support it appropriately? And I think it's true to say we have funded, we have been strategic to a point, but perhaps we're not strategic enough. I work within the Education Development Service and obviously sit more in line with the academics, and we've brought academics in, and because of their workload, some of those have unfortunately had to drop out of the support. We work closely with SU, we work closely with our careers colleagues, so we have got people that are interested, but it does seem to be a question mark about the time it takes to be involved in Enactus, both from a student and staff point of view. So I'm sort of just putting it out there really in terms of the first year for us went really well. We had direct impact, but it actually completely relied on 2 or 3 very strong students. And whilst there were many within that, it was those 2 or 3 that carried it through. Second year, very similar. There was a bit of a handover going on, and I have to say the sustainability of the handover wasn't that brilliant. And again, I think some of those students were postgrads, international students, who probably were doing something very quickly and therefore wasn't nurturing the project, although it was a project that had got great stakeholder involvement. And this year it is sort of just fallen apart at the seams completely. And that's because we've tried to get a diverse array of different students involved and different reasons as to why that hasn't worked. So whilst we are trying to consider all of that, we are now hoping to go back to first principles and look at it so that we have a ready-made platform to really start to recruit differently from September. I have put a few questions up, dealing projects with embedded work, ideation, and I did attend one of the advisors group in London, I think it was the year before last, which was brilliant. And actually that worked to a point, but again, it just does depend on students. I'm also interested to know, how do you promote specifically to students, and how do you recruit and how do you promotion and recruitment, to me, seems to be quite different. When do you recruit? Is it ongoing? I did meet up with Mo from Aston, who has done an amazing job at working with their group, and they've suggested an advisory board. And I'd be interested to note if anybody has an advisory board and how that works, and how do we get staff buy-in, and we have looked at different courses whereby they have more of an enterprise or a social impact, and tenuously, yes, there's involvement, but not enough buy-in really. So those are sort of my questions, and I would love to know how you're getting on within your institutions.
That's great, Leslie. Before we invite some comments, suggestions from the participants today, can you tell us a little bit more about the context at BCU? So what's BCU like as a university?
Yeah.
How many active members are there in your Enactus team?
Yeah.
What kind of project, how many projects, those kind of things, just to give us some idea of what it's like at BCU.
Okay, the first year we had probably about 30 students, of which I would say about 10 were active, whereby they worked on a uniquely upcycled project, which was, as I say, the most successful, where it was aimed at long-term disabled people within the community, whereby they were providing a living wage, working at home on sort of a creative piece of work, whilst also looking at the environmental structures within that. The second year we worked with a food bank, and we were looking at, it was the largest food bank in Birmingham, and they had access to a very small cafe facility that needed to be refurbished, and they had quite an interesting cohort of people that came in from the community, and some of those were single parents, and they wanted to raise aspirations, and the team were looking at how they could work within, so it's like a social cafe attached to the food bank, and actually discussions got quite far with that, but the students seemed to sort of be reluctant in making decisions, and that was probably because the stakeholder was very strong, and they may have felt that they were therefore not actually running the project as they should, despite lots of conversations. And then that project just fell to one side, to be honest, although we still have links with the food project. And the third year, we've actually met with some great stakeholders. We've got a retired superintendent from West Midlands Police who is active about working with young people in the community on a sports basis, and loves the bones of Enactus. And he's really keen to start working with a group of committed students. I have to say, he's been to one meeting with the current, well, that was students, and he was very aware that we were building a team. And he also brought in Sport Birmingham, and obviously we've got Commonwealth Games coming in. So there's a lot of different types of stakeholder interest. So we were actually starting to get somewhere on that. And then we had a couple of students who, for a whole host of reasons, couldn't commit. So we actually went to regionals with almost a new team that was trying to get a sense of what Enactus was.
Yeah.
Now that's where we are at the moment. Now, you could argue that we've probably got about 70 students that have signed up, but that's not 70 active students.
Yeah.
And obviously some of those now are moving on.
So Leslie, it sounds like there's quite a lot in there. So let's unpick that. But we've had a couple of comments come in, so I'll just share those.
Thank you.
So Rob Moss at Coventry says that his role is very much more external to the university, aimed at delivering advisory support to the teams. So things like recruitment and internal promotion are not something that he's involved in. But Rob, we may come back to you because advisory board is one of the questions on Leslie's thing. So hold that thought. Philip Clegg says, we had a boom to bust journey in our first 2 years. Now effectively starting again, and we'll be working closely with careers to promote the employability angle. We'll be using the original core Enactus leaders to promote Enactus to new students at freshers, selling value of the opportunity into senior leaders at the university too, to increase an engagement and awareness with staff. So if anyone else has got, should we stick with, let's go with, let's take a question. So you kind of came in, let's start with recruiting students. Because that seems to be one of the challenges that you're kind of facing and leads on to some of the other things. So
can I just say sorry, Bonnie, to interrupt. Can I just say something there in terms of the recruitment as well? I mean, we are a very diverse university right in the middle of Birmingham. And we have around about 70% commuter students. And a lot of those are first generation at university. There's something about their understanding of I've arrived, so therefore I don't need to do anything else. And there's a big sort of challenge that we have with that. And I just wonder how perhaps other universities may have dealt with that, particularly from an Enactus point of view.
So to build on that question then, so if anyone has got experience to share of how you recruit students, particularly if you have students, or at least some students like Leslie has described, who are commuter students who maybe have very busy lives in addition to university. I know all students have busy lives, but more busy than usual. And if you've been successful in getting those students to join your Enactus team, how have you gone about that? So if anyone has anything to share, you're welcome to unmute yourself and speak to us, or you're welcome to type some comments into the chat function. Gary Wood, would you like to say something, Gary?
Yes, please. Can you hear me? Okay.
I can indeed.
Excellent. So I just wanted to pick up on this idea of recruiting students, and I think although we're in a different position in Sheffield in not having so many commuter students, I think where I potentially can draw on our experience to offer you some advice is that for us, what really stands out with Enactus is that it's not that students want to join the program because they see the opportunity to enhance their employability or because they want to develop their own skills. That really just kind of falls out from the fact that they're so passionate about wanting to use their learning from their degree and their broader skills to make a positive impact in the world and improve the lives of others. And I wonder if there might be something in that you could use with your students in terms of giving them an opportunity to actually take action with the learning that they're getting from their degree and the skills that they brought into their degree. And so they can see an opportunity to start making a positive impact rather than necessarily focusing on building their own profile, because the building their own profile just happens naturally through the process of them being passionate about wanting to make a positive change. And I think kind of related to that, you talked in the opening about links with modules and potentially using modules as a way of recruiting students. I think that's something that we've talked about in Sheffield, but we've kind of deliberately avoided in the sense that we want students to be doing Enactus because they're passionate about making that difference, because we know that that's where they get the most value and where they're the most invested. And the problem that we're concerned about with starting that engagement through modules is that we could end up with students who are, committed to it because they want to get a grade at the end of the module, but then are less committed to the kind of follow through on that in the longer term, because once they've got that module, they're that grade, they're less, their commitment drops off. So where we have used links with modules effectively is at the ideation stage of projects. So the aim has not been that during the course of a module you would establish an Enactus project and then start to operate it, but we've used the process of the module to come up with ideas that can then either, if the students are interested and passionate, that's great, they might join Enactus and help to take them forwards after the module. But otherwise, the ideas can be developed by other people who are passionate about them, because I think that's one of the challenges for beginning Enactus teams, and indeed beginning members coming in and starting new projects, is actually going through that ideation phase and coming up with projects that feel achievable to them, but that they can be sufficiently passionate about that they want to be committed to them. And so perhaps using modules to help you with coming up with some really solid project ideas might be a positive step forwards.
That's great help. And I think you're absolutely right. And I have to sort of put my hands up here in terms of when we've promoted it initially, I think we did a heavy promotion on what it can do for them rather than what it should be doing. And we have changed that, but I think, the narrative is probably still lurking there somewhere. So I think you're absolutely right. And it's, going back to the all win thing, isn't it? About we do it all for the right reasons, not just because I'm sticking it on my LinkedIn profile to say that I've done this, this, and this, and actually have done very little. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And I think what's important there is actually promoting it to different people in different ways. So for students, we don't put the emphasis on skills development. We put the emphasis on them having the opportunity to make a positive difference. Whereas when I'm talking to senior people in the university, I talk a little bit about that positive difference because it links nicely with some aspects of our university strategic plan. But also when if I'm talking to our vice president for learning and teaching, for example, then I put the focus more on the skills development this is giving students. So it's just about thinking, what's the right message for the right audience, I guess.
Absolutely right. Yeah, that's great. And something that I've had a meeting with our SU and our Deputy Vice Chancellor this morning about that and how we do that. That's brilliant. Thank you. Yeah.
And some further thoughts coming through in chat. So Mo Rasool from Aston says, we raised the value of Enactus as a brand, and this has attracted students. We also went very heavy with social media and linked with central marketing in the university. Rob Moss from Coventry adds, interesting to hear Gary's views. The few Enactus students I've met with have engaged on the basis of doing good, but then see the personal and career development as something that helps them to keep engaged when it gets tough with the academic pressure. I'd add to that as well, Leslie. I feel like Gary does that, the kind of getting them to find their own buy-in to Enactus and doing something that they feel passionate about can be really important. And one of the things that I did as a way to try and help our Enactus team identify some more people that might be interested, but also some more projects, was I ran what I called a Global Goals Creativity Cafe. So I used the World Cafe methodology, but I selected some of the global goals because there are some of them that I don't think lend themselves easily to beneficiaries, which is obviously one of the key kind of aspects of Enactus. And so we ran that, and so out of that there were about 3 or 4 different projects that were identified. But the idea wasn't to go in with it and say we're gonna make Enactus projects out of this. It was to give students the opportunity to use their creativity to think about the global goals in a way that helped them to identify some opportunities to help make progress on those goals. And then if a particular idea or thought or suggestion came out of it that Enactus was interested in and the individual was interested in Enactus for, then that might be something that went forward. So I can share that file with everyone if that's of interest to you. And you won't hurt my feelings at all if it isn't, trust me. How can I share my file? I'll find a way to share my file. But I think that whole issue of getting people involved and getting them to find what they're passionate about is really, really important.
Yeah.
Any other? So Gary has kind of seconded Rob's comment that doing good is very much the initial hook and a key motivator.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with students seeing the value to themselves later. Indeed, it helps with motivation and is key to them being able to articulate the skills they gain to future employers. So if anyone has any more thoughts or comments to share with Leslie, but also with everyone in the webinar, then you, as I say, you're welcome to unmute yourself and say a few words, or you are welcome to put something in chat.
I'd be interested to note if anybody, I know that Mo Aston has an advisory board, and I'm really interested to consider that, and whether anybody else has.
Okay, so if anyone's got experience of an advisory board, or Rob, you mentioned maybe that you're on the advisory board, perhaps you'd like to share your thoughts and your insights on that. And I say people are welcome to speak in words if that's easier than typing.
Yeah, I wasn't going to inflict my croaky voice on you. I'm suffering from a cold, but maybe
we hope you feel better.
But yeah, I mean, I think I needed to sort of say just a couple of words verbally, because I'm still finding my way through the Enactus system here at Coventry in London. We're on the London campus. So, I mean, I'm involved with an enterprise hub as a consultant, so very much delivering practical advice to getting businesses off the ground. And yeah, we may well have an advisory board, but I haven't quite tracked down the systems and the processes. So at this moment in time, I'm very much wanting to nurture the quite small team that we've got. They're sort of expressing problems around, well, are we going to get people actually contributing proper activity to this? You know, is it just going to come on our shoulders? And I think there's probably some nervousness about what they're letting themselves in for. So I think being reassured with people to sort of help them understand those different aspects is probably what they're after. So not quite an answer to your question, Lizzie, I'm afraid.
And I think that's a fair comment, to be honest, because you know we have had many different colleagues involved at various stages, and there is a real will to want this to work. And then the reality is that we've all got to put extra time in, and as you said, Bonnie, you know, we're doing this on top of the day job almost. So it is a really interesting one, but I do think there is, from sort of talking to other colleagues about the merit of the advisory board, because it does share the load with externals as well as internals. So again, that might alleviate any sort of issues or worries or concerns with colleagues thinking, well, is this just going to be dumped on me and therefore I have to do it all? And I have to say that's been part of my experience. There's been about 2 or 3 of us that sort of kept it, sort of held on to it. And so it's, yes, you've got to have a passion for it yourself, but also make sure that we're sharing it. And that's something that I really want to start to look at, is the advisory boards made up of lots of different people.
Okay.
Just something to add, Bonnie, just very quickly. I mean, as a more practical external person, it's quite attractive to me to sort of say, okay, so I turn up and do my stuff. You know, somebody internal to the organization is responsible for promoting and recruiting, because I don't really have the ins to that. And I think if that's sort of can feed into your advisory board, so that you've got people internally who know that all they've got to do is just stimulate a bit of interest, and then they hand it over to the practical advisors, if you want to call it that, to actually deliver on and mentor and coach and all those sorts of things. Maybe that might be more attractive to internal staff who, as you say, have already got a busy load. Also attractive to external people who oh God, I've got to try and get numbers onto this I don't know how to do that, but I do know how to help them with their planning, team development.
Which is great. Thanks very much for that, Rob. We've got a few more sort of comments and things coming in on the chat. So Mo from Aston says, on another note, for undergraduate students, their Enactus role is formally recognized on their HERE document, their Higher Education Achievement Report, which is their academic transcript. For postgraduates, they are recognized in a professional development module. Now here's one for you, Leslie. Do you know Bob Lee from what I assume is University of Birmingham?
I don't know Bob, but he's just round the corner. Hello, Bob.
Okay. Because he says, some good suggestions, thanks to all. My role is more on the marketing side rather than an advisory role, so I'm listening in. Here at University of Birmingham, we have a similar problem where we get good interest and then have a slump when students graduate. So a continuous peak and dip in interest at different times. So one of my suggestions, Leslie, would be that you and Bob need to get your heads together and kind of work on this together. That might be quite interesting as well.
Yeah, happy to do that.
So I'll leave the two of you to work that bit
please.
out. So we have also got, we'll come back to that one. So Philip has asked another question, Philip from Huddersfield. Does anyone have experience of overcoming the commuter student challenge that you mentioned, Leslie, as they have the same issue? And so, but neither Gary nor myself have that issue at Sheffield or here at St Andrews. And Gary's wondering if maybe commuting itself is the problem, or if students have particular other commitments that require them to commute, and it's those commitments that are the barrier. So
I think it's both.
Maybe a subtle distinction to think about.
Yeah. What was interesting from the perspective, and again, looking at some of those commuter students and the diverse array of our students, is trying to get, yes, many of them have got part-time jobs, yes, they are local and they come in and they go out. But actually, there's a lot of different activities that go on, I guess, in most universities that we try and engage them and keep them as part of the community. But I do wonder whether Enactus feels out of their league, and there is something about how we try and get the community element, because actually there is such a lot of great community work that goes on within Enactus, but maybe we need to sort of focus in on that from a, love your community type of scenario, and taking Enactus out to them. And that's something that, just talking it through and considering whether we need to sort of consider looking at where the communities are, and is there something that we need to do and do a bit of outreach. But again, that's on top of the day job. So it sounds great as an idea, but in practice, will it work? I don't know.
But Leslie, I heard you say that did I hear you say that 70% of your students are commuter students?
Yeah.
So you've got 30% that are not commuter students.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe the place to start is actually where the issue is different, or maybe not quite as, well, I don't know what the right word is. Commuting brings an added level of complication to get them involved for the reasons that have been discussed. And so maybe trying to focus the marketing and promotion in the first instance on those who are not commuter students might give you a nucleus of really keen, enthusiastic people that have got the time and not the complication of commuting to get Enactus going. And then when they have one or two projects that are really going reasonably well and are quite interesting, that might give you something practical to reach out to the computer students with, to say, hey, you want to get involved in this.
Yeah.
Not just you want to get involved in Enactus, this amorphous kind of, doing and solving some social needs. You want to get involved in this project that's dealing with homelessness or poverty or whatever it might be. It gives them something a little bit more specific to get involved in.
Absolutely, that's a great idea. And again, thinking about the comment that Gary made, it's about differentiation, isn't it, of both students and staff, really, and how we promote differently. And I don't think we've done that. We've done the one size fits all.
Absolutely.
That's time related, I think.
And Philip has responded to Gary's comment to say that he understands that commuting status as they live at home generally contributes to low-level society engagement, not just Enactus specifically.
Yeah.
And we've had a couple of other comments. So Mo from Aston says, for commuting students, I would look at developing projects that sit within their own communities, linked to their local schools, their community center, their faith center, and others. They're more likely to engage if they feel projects are closer to home and also within their comfort zone.
Yeah, great.
So some good suggestions there, I think.
Yeah.
And another suggestion on the back of Mo's is, I think having strong projects is a great way to bring new students in. Taking a group of students to National Expo or World Cup can be helpful in this regard too.
And that's an interesting one, Bonnie, because the second year we actually did offer that the students were sort of forming a new group to go to national, and they went to training camp. And actually, I think they came back wanting to change the world, which was lovely, but they were almost, their thinking was so, and we had spent quite a lot of time trying to bring them back down to sort of get a sense of scoping out what a project should really be. You know, they really were impressed with everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they hadn't perhaps been in that environment before, they came away so pumped that we had to sort of say, right, okay, now we've got to consider how this works on the ground. And that was tricky.
Yeah. And thinking about advisory board, Debbie has said that their board has just restarted, so they've only had one meeting so far. She thinks the team found it useful to meet with their business advisors and to ask what help they can offer to each project and to the wider team. They're hoping to have 2 meetings a year going forward. And that's been kind of similar in St Andrews as well, because we're kind of geographically distant from pretty much anywhere in the UK. We have some business advisors, and I met with one of our business advisors recently for another reason. And what she was saying is that what she thought the team valued was that real world perspective. So she's a business owner of a social enterprise in her own right. And so she was just kind of giving them that sort of reality check, which I think they found quite helpful. So Patrick, I'll come back to your question in a moment. So Robert Coventry says that most of his graduate entrepreneurs use Skype meetings as a regular and integral way of team working. Maybe in London, everyone is a commuter. So perhaps Enactus students should adopt this working methodology at an early stage. And he recognizes that that's not a catch-all answer, but it might just offer up another opportunity.
I think as well, and actually this is really good because it sort of does generate some sort of ideas. We've just started to use Team so again we could potentially introduce, because I think they previously used Slack. So there's things that we should perhaps be supporting them with too, because I do think there is something about, you know, I can't come in at this time and vice versa, and of course then the meeting just gets depleted. Yeah, that's a really interesting one.
Yeah. I think Gary would like to make another comment. Gary, would you like to unmute yourself and speak to us?
Thanks, Bonnie. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the point that Leslie just made about students going to national competition. Sorry, excuse me. And then coming back really excited, but then perhaps that not moving forwards in a positive way. And I wonder whether you've looked at the business model canvas. Because it sounds to me like it's not a lack of enthusiasm that's driving the students forward, but perhaps that there might be a sense of frustration that they have a vision, but they're not quite sure how to get where they are now to realizing that vision.
That's a great point,
and so I think talking to them about the fact that what they've seen is inspiring because it's a vision, but actually what they need is a plan for how they might actually get there. And the business model canvas, if you haven't come across it, could be a really helpful way to do that, because it's very visual. You can print it off and put it in the middle of the table, and it gets you to think through the kinds of areas that you might do if you were writing a more formal, structured business plan, but you can use it to stimulate a discussion and capture the thoughts in a more fluid way. And that might be a way of giving them some tools to start thinking about, if that's our vision, what do we actually need to do to get there?
Brilliant. That's a great idea. Thank you, Gary. Yeah, we haven't done that because it's all been a bit piecemeal here, there, and everywhere. But I think that's a really good idea to put in. Yeah, thank you.
And I've got some slides, Leslie, if it's useful, that I use to introduce that and share it with students. I'd be happy to share that with you afterwards.
Oh, if you would, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
And I've just sent around a link to the business model canvas. I think probably most everyone has seen it, but just in case you haven't. We've also had, on a slightly separate point, Patrick from Lancaster says, I had some queries around the management of risk and accountability. Our Enactus group do some quite complex and challenging projects. Jailbreak, working with vulnerable people, and even overseas community projects. Who's accountable for managing the safety and risk, and how is the institution ensuring the infrastructure is effectively in place to manage this? Patrick, that's something to take to your Enactus program manager. Enactus has an excellent series of tools that help to do that, and particularly with regards to international projects, they're very hot on that. So the Enactus sort of UK toolkit has some things that help you with that. Specifically at St Andrews, because our society, our Enactus, is an affiliated society, they're kind of insured, if you like, through our Students Association.
Yeah. And I think that was one of the reasons we kept it within our SU as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So some more thoughts coming in about the use of the business model canvas, and people suggesting that they perhaps start with that. I think that's a really brilliant idea.
Yeah.
So quite a lot of sharing going on there. When I talk about resources, all of us who are university advisors have access to the Enactus UK sort of resources, online resources, but they are behind a password. So if you don't have access or you don't know where to find them, then probably Holly Stanton is the best person to ask, and she can help you get sorted out with a password if you don't have one, or to access it if, like I often do, you've lost your password and you can't remember what it is. Okay. So we've still got quite a bit of time. Has anyone else got any further comments, either for Leslie or on anything else that you've heard, or any other questions that you came to this webinar thinking, oh, it'd be interesting to find out more about that? So you're welcome to put them in chat or to unmute yourself and speak to us.
Bonnie, can I ask a question about funding?
Of course.
The different levels of funding per university. Obviously, I'm not sort of asking anyone to disclose anything that they don't want to, but is there a commitment that each university has? Which pot of funding does it come out of? Obviously, you know, we are encouraging students to generate funds. I completely get that, but I just wonder how that works at each university.
If anyone's happy to comment while people are kind of formulating their thoughts or putting it in. At St Andrews, I'm Enterprise Advisor in the Career Centre, so I have a very small budget that I can use, and I've tended to fund some things like attendance at training weekend, attendance at nationals, regionals, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I also, Enactus projects, if you like, can apply for any of our competitions. They can enter any of our competitions and get a small amount of funding that way.
Okay, thank you.
So any other thoughts on, or any other information to share on how funding works for Enactus in your institution? So Philip is suggesting that they use some of their Santander funding to promote and support Enactus activity.
Yeah.
Also, I would say that, at least in St Andrews, as they're affiliated, they have access to some small amounts of funding through the Students Association. Coventry, I think our guys get a couple of thousand, but doesn't know particularly any detail about that, how what the constraints are, how that money is released. So I think you'll find the model is different in different institutions.
Yeah. And again, from our point of view, we have supported the training and nationals, and we have supported them with some of the marketing, but again, there's been very little income generated from themselves yet. So
Yeah.
That's something that we were really quite keen to develop last year.
Yeah. And so someone has said that their business school provides the team, let me just read it. Our business school provides our team with a lump sum of money each year, about £1,000. And she's currently looking for other funding the team can access.
Okay.
Aston says that they have funding from the university and also mentions crowdfunding and the B-Scene enterprise startup. Sheffield has a modest internal budget from their HIFE allocation, and that's used to provide logistical support, for example, travel to National Expo, training, and other events like that.
Yeah.
To seed fund new projects to help get them off the ground. They don't give it to students up front, though, because it's a way for them to be able to provide a bit of strategic guidance.
Okay.
And there's also all of the funding through Enactus UK. They have all sorts of different kind of funds. It's competitive, but there is some kind of funding there that they can apply for.
Yeah. We try to do a little bit of match funding with one team.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
There's been another question if we would like to move the discussion on for a few minutes.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to discuss handover. How do students hand over well? What is an ideal handover which ensures the same quality of team approach is maintained? All I can say, if anyone has worked that out, please tell us the answer. So if anyone has thoughts on sort of handover, again, you're welcome to put something in chat, or you're welcome to unmute yourself and speak to us. While we're waiting for people, I'd say in my experience, like all things student, Enactus goes up and down. And so with regards to handover, what they're doing in St Andrews now is, because it's part of the Students Association, the new committee was elected in sort of March time. And the individual that was elected as the team leader has been in Enactus for a number of years. So handover, I think, is important, but less important if you've got some continuity in terms of people having been involved in Enactus and then maybe stepping up to a position of more responsibility. But even that said, in my experience, people that come in new have their own ideas that they want to kind of move forward, whether that's in terms of structure, team structure, whether that's in terms of projects, whatever it might be. And so even though the actual passing of the baton, if you will, is relatively smooth, what happens when they start in their new role is not necessarily a direct follow-on from what happened before. Mm-hmm. Just kind of the nature of it for me. So some comments coming in. So with our current team, we've discussed building on the work of a previous team and leaving some delivery structure for those following on. But that's all at the moment. Is a bit of chat. And that's at Coventry. At Manchester, our incoming committee has shadowed the outgoing committee for a few months, which I think has helped with the transition. Our students' union also require a handover document, passwords, access to web accounts, and more. From Sheffield, the key thing with handover is to identify new people early on and have them shadow the existing leaders, then take the reins in a phased way. We start handover before Christmas, and the new leaders take up full responsibility from the day after National Expo, whilst the outgoing directors are still around to provide mentorship. I think that sounds like a great model, but I can't imagine at St Andrews how they would focus on that before Christmas and Nationals coming after, but I think it's really something worth thinking about. So, are there any other sort of questions or comments or things that people would like to speak about? I do have a couple of slides about sort of things that are coming, sort of key dates of Enactus going forward. So I'd like to share those before we finish. So if anyone has any other comments or questions, if you could raise those now, then we can bring the webinar to a close on time. So at Aston, they're in the middle of handover and the new team has been shadowing, and they're just hoping that the momentum is maintained. Mo, I think that's the case everywhere. Certainly this at St Andrews. Be interesting to see. Right. So, Leslie, if you would like to stop sharing your screen, please, and then I will share the slides I've got. That'd be brilliant. Right, so let's see. I will now see if I can share my screen. Share. Okay, so I want to go back one, and I want to go here. Okay, ooh, right. So in terms of some Enactus UK key dates going forward, you'll see them here. The Leadership Summit, it will be hopefully the 17th and the 18th of June in London, and the team is allowed to send 2 people to that. Oh, wrong thing. And the team is allowed to send 2 people to that. The team also needs to do deadline to enter the summer action competition is the 31st of August. And for people that don't know, they run that competition every year. And what that really is designed to do is is to encourage teams to keep doing some things over the year or over the summer. And so there's a lot of resources and support for that. So that's something that your team may well wish to take part in. And then you can see some of the other things that are there. These are really the kind of most of these are the student focused dates. And I'll go on to the University Advisor ones in just a moment. So interestingly, the dates for regional competitions as well as National Expo 2020 are out. So I encourage you to put those in your diary now, so you don't miss out. And so you've got a placeholder over those. In terms of University Advisor sort of events and meetings going forward, there's a possible face-to-face opportunity for us in June, and I need to. And so that is the potential. The most popular date is actually the 25th of June. And I will put out in chat, if you have not had an opportunity to respond to that doodle poll that we sent out, I think I put the doodle poll in the invitation for this webinar. So you're welcome to check that, or I'll put it into chat in just a moment. I also mentioned earlier that we are hopefully going to be having, or we're trying to have these sessions, these webinars more or less monthly, and we're kind of taking it in turns. So like this one, this has been steering group led. So thank you very much to Leslie for being our case study and for doing this for us. That's wonderful. And then in October, we would hope to have an Enactus led one. In November, they're considering regional training. So you may remember that regional training historically has involved the students only. And so the students traveled to, I think it was Durham Valley this past November, for an intensive weekend of training with Enactus core team and other Enactus team members from other institutions. And this year, they're thinking to make that training regional so that they can, make more spots available because teams are limited to how many people they can take, but also potentially to involve some of us in that regional training, or to give us an opportunity to have some training or to work with each other. So watch this space. And then in December, you'll see another steering group led webinar, and then hopefully in January, another face-to-face event. So that is the way the dates are looking. Before we kind of close, right. So Rosie has said that she will make sure she shares the Enactus resources for international projects, which Patrick had particularly asked about. Thank you very much for that, Rosie. And yes, we will share. If not, we can share the slides, Gary, no problem at all. But it may be a little bit more efficient just to kind of send that in an email. But we'll do that. We'll make sure we do that. Did anyone have any other further questions or anything that you wish to cover? I said I would share the doodle poll link. So that is coming through now. If you have not completed the doodle poll, can I ask you to click on the link that I just put into the chat function, the doodle poll link. And then once we've closed the webinar, please go in and give us your availability for the potential UA Summit dates in June. Okay? So if there are no other questions or comments, Rosie, did you have anything you wanted to say? No, she's letting it be. She's letting it be complete. She's letting it be UA led, which is fantastic. So it just remains for me to say thank you so much to everyone for coming. It's been great to hear your comments, and thank you so much for your participation. If you do have any thoughts on further topics, like Leslie offered to be our case study today to talk about recruitment, and it led on to some other really interesting conversations, then please, you're very welcome to let me know or to let someone else in Enactus UK know. And we'd be delighted to welcome any of you if you've got a challenge you're facing, or positively, maybe you've got something that you think goes extremely well within your institution and you'd like to kind of share that as a case study. We'd welcome your thoughts and your suggestions for, as volunteers, to kind of be in the chair in one of these webinars, but also things that you'd like hearing about. So thanks very much to everyone, and we will also make sure that this recording is up in the resources, in the Enactus UK resources. So if you wanted a bit of a reminder of it at any point, or there's some points you missed, you can listen to it again or share it with another UA in your institution. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Bonnie. Really useful. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Leslie.
Bye-bye.
Take care all. Bye.
Bye.